We continue our off-season check-in series with Robbie Falk of Maroon and White Daily. He covers the Bulldogs for On Three, and I know you've been busy with baseball, just bringing in Brian O'Connor, new head coach for the Diamond Dogs. But football season is less than 3 months away, and I know as soon as the portal's done and everything's through, looking forward to the future at Duty Noble. We're going to be talking about Jeff Levy and his crew soon enough. So, Robbie, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate you, man.
So 2-10's rough for everybody. There's really no way to sugarcoat it, but I also don't think a lot of people understand just how much change has happened in Starkville. When you have Mike Leach die, when you go to they promote the interim and only have 1 year of him, that's a new system and a new system and a new system. So there's been a whole lot of change in Starkville, and Jeff Levy is just trying now to stabilize things there for Mississippi State, it feels like.
Yeah, if you look at it, and here the example I always give about Mississippi State and just how dire things were with this roster is they didn't have a single player invited to the NFL Combine. And everybody gets a player invited to the NFL Combine, especially in the SEC. I mean, State has certainly had their share of guys invited to that Combine. There was nobody. And they had some free agent signees. We'll see if any of those guys stick. But this roster was in a very, very bad space. And we kept track of the transfer portal and who was coming in, who was coming out, like we all do. And when you look at the guys and where they went, that's a pretty good indicator of what kind of talent you had. And I don't want to, diminish those players or anything like that. But when you look at that and they're going from an SEC school to a group of five school or lower, it kind of tells you where you're at. And State had, 20 plus guys into the portal, and they brought in 20 plus guys. They're trying to flip this roster pretty quickly because I thought the evaluations were not very good in the previous staffs. I didn't think the recruiting was great, and the development wasn't very good either. You didn't see a whole lot of guys getting that much better. So Jeff Levy is going to be judged over the next couple of years and whether or not he can get this thing back on track. But I can't put a lot of fault on him just yet. When you look at the roster and the talent that they had or what they didn't have, I think that this year should be a little better indicator, and maybe even the next year when he's had a chance to cycle through some transfer portal players, high school guys, JUCO guys, and then we'll truly be able to say whether or not Jeff Levy can coach in this league. But I think when you look at the guys that he had on the field last year, it was really tough to imagine State being able to come through with a bowl game or 4 or 5 wins for that team last year. It was just very difficult with the schedule that they had too. When you're playing Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Ole Miss all on the road, that's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. You have 3 playoff teams in there. You have to go on the road, and then an Ole Miss team that's probably the most talented team they've ever had. So we'll see this year how it shakes out, but he certainly had his back against the wall and his hand tied behind his back with this roster that he had.
Part of the trouble was at the quarterback position. We know that's a big part of that offense. Started the year hoping Blake Shapen would be something, gets hurt, and you go to the Van Buren and the Chris Parson and back and forth. Now it's Shapen's job again. What are some of the expectations on him as he enters a crucial year for his career and for the Bulldogs?
Well, that was Jeff Levy's guy. That's who he picked out of the transfer portal, and it was supposed to be, his season last year, and then hand things over to Michael Van Buren or whoever else after that in 2025. But he ends up being injured in the Florida game, and I guess the bright spot of it is you get Blake Shapen back for another year this year because of that. And I know that Jeff Levy's very high on Blake Shapen. He believes that he's a guy that can manufacture a lot of big plays for them in this offense. He can run this offense how he wants it to be run. He's a very smart guy. He's got some good tools to him. I think he can do anything that Jeff Levy wants his quarterbacks to be able to do. The big question mark with him is whether or not he's going to be able to stay healthy for a full season. And he hasn't missed a ton of football. It's not like he's having a season-ending injury every year, but he's been banged up a lot. He's had concussions. He's had shoulder injuries. He's had knee injuries. it's just one of those deals where you need him to be healthy for a long period of time here and let him run your offense. And that's going to be the question, is whether or not he can do that for a full season. The big point of emphasis for them in the offseason so far has been trying to get him to understand that he doesn't have to take those big hits. He doesn't have to lower his head and try to run over somebody. If you're going out of bounds, go out of bounds. Don't try to get that extra yard. Um, if you need to slide, do that. And I think he understands that. He's talked about that being a point of emphasis as well. So that's the big thing for him this year. I think he's just got to be a smarter quarterback for Mississippi State to have success. I like what they have behind him, and Luke Kromenhawk from Florida State, and also Kamario Taylor. Kamario Taylor's a really exciting young quarterback that has Mississippi State ties, and I think is going to be a really special player. But the best case scenario here for Mississippi State is Blake Shapen gives you a really good year. Those two are learning under him. Maybe they get some good quality reps, and then you can turn it over to those guys. That's, I think, the best case scenario, is you're able to bring those younger guys along, and Blake Shapen has a really successful senior season.
If you go to the transfer portal page over on Maroon and White, a lot of offensive linemen, rebuilt offensive line trying to come through and do what Jeff Lebby wants to do. And of course, that fear and shoot offense has the wide splits, but it also is predicated on running the ball. And one of the best running backs from the group of 5 is heading to Starkville. That is Fluff Bothwell from South Al. What are some expectations for him? And I know that they're bringing back some other big pieces on that offense via the portal. But with Fluff, it seems like he's going to be the exciting engine that helps this offense go.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a big pickup for them. You also got, it was almost like getting an additional running back out of the portal and Davon Booth. That was a guy that you didn't think you were going to bring back for another year, but the JUCO ruling comes into effect. He gets a year back, and you have one more season of Davon Booth, who late in the season had really started to turn things on. People forget he transferred here from Utah State, and he got here in the summer last year. So it was kind of a late arrival, and he also had to rush the process of learning the offense, things like that. He wasn't here in the spring. So it took him a little bit to get going. But once he did, I think he had 3 or 4 100-yard rushing games in the last 5 or 6 games last year. And the running game really started to kind of come along late in the season. Adding him back for another year while he's had a full season under his belt and now another offseason is really big for Mississippi State. And I think it's going to be tough to keep him off the field. Then you add in Fluff Bothwell, who was probably the best running back in the group of 5 last year. He was arguably the top running back in the transfer portal. Low center of gravity, really strong guy, kind of a bowling ball type running back for you that you add in there. That's a guy that's going to be able to finish red zone appearances for Mississippi State, something that they really struggled to do last year. When they got on the inside the 5-yard line, it got difficult at times for them to score. I think that's one where even if your offensive line isn't opening up big holes, Fluff can get you some extra yardage. So I think that's going to be a really good 1-2 combination for Mississippi State, a veteran in Davon Booth, who's played a lot of football on this level, and then Fluff, who is a really exciting young running back Mississippi State can do a lot of things with. That's going to be kind of the centerpiece of your offense because you have so many unproven pieces at wide receiver. I think those two are going to be big for you. And the running game is such a big part of Jeff Lebby's offense. I think a lot of people look at the passing numbers and, the big plays, the explosive plays that they have in the passing game, and they think this is a passing offense. This offense is predicated on what they do in the run game. And you're talking about a coach that is a former offensive lineman, a former offensive line coach. Jeff Lebby appreciates the run game more than anybody. So the running game for Mississippi State and the veer and shoot is as important as anything. And I think they're going to be a little more competent in that early on in the season compared to last year.
Booth, I saw he penned a really awesome letter talking about his son, I think on the Mississippi State official website, and playing for him and getting another season. Seems like a really, really easy guy to root for. And Fluff, that's going to make it a very exciting backfield. And like you mentioned, you don't want Shapen taking all those hits with how fragile he's been over the course of his career. So seems like you'll see them lean on them a lot. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, Coleman Hutzler, that's a name that Texas fans are familiar with, was an assistant, I think, on Tom Herman's last year at Texas. A lot of Texas fans really liked him, maybe thought that Steve Sarkisian could retain him and bring him in, elected to go a different route. And I know that Hutzler's kind of bounced around a little bit, but what are some of the expectations on the defense here heading into year two? Again, we had talked about all the different changes going from a pretty normal defense to that 3-3-5 stack and now changing things up again. Is it kind of the same thing as the offense where you're getting guys who fit the system a little bit better?
Hi, guys. Sorry to interrupt, but if you're thinking about buying or selling a home in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, you need to contact Josh Holden. The Metroplex is massive, and the local real estate market is full of nuances and subtleties only an experienced agent like Josh can help you navigate. From Preston Hollow to Highland Park, Uptown to Old East Dallas, Josh will be there to guide you through the process of buying or selling your home. Now, Josh is a UT grad, a lifetime Texas Ex. He's reliable, savvy, and from a personal perspective, he's a really great guy to chat with. So why don't you give him a call and chat with him today about your real estate needs in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. His number is 972-917-8081. That's 972-917-8081. Or you can reach him at his website, which is joshholdenrealestate.com. All the contact details are in the description below. Thanks so much. And back to the show.
Yeah, and the big thing for them was going out in the transfer portal. They needed to go get more talented players, bigger players up front, first and foremost, and some more depth. And they just didn't have that last year. And in many ways, Hutzler was to blame for a lot of the defensive issues. We look there's videos that went around early on last year of like the misalignments that they had on the defensive side of the ball. The defense was the worst that Mississippi State's had in at least 22 years. But I think, again, like we talked about earlier, the roster was really bad. They didn't have depth. The defensive line depth was extremely bad. And the players that they had up front were, quite frankly, there just wasn't a lot of SEC talent. So, and that's been kind of a calling card for Mississippi State over the years, is even if they didn't have a good team, they had a hard-nosed defense. And specifically, they had a really good defensive front. And you look at the players that are in the NFL over the years from Mississippi State, that kind of speaks to it. It's per capita, it's a really strong group of alumni that played defensive line for Mississippi State. When you look at the Chris Jones of the world and the Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, Fletcher Cox, Pernell McPhee, some great pro players. They played under defensive line coach David Turner. So this is really the first time that David Turner's had a crew here that just was not very good. So a lot of finger pointing at Coleman Hutzler, a lot of finger pointing at David Turner. But at the end of the day, they had to go out there and change that front. I think they did change that front with some more competent defensive linemen. And I think they've added some SEC bodies up there. I think they've added some depth. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback a little bit better this year. Last year was a disaster. They only had 10 sacks as a team, and very little pressure on the quarterback. They really struggled to get off the field. I think it starts with the defensive line, and if that unit is able to produce a little bit for Mississippi State, I think it changes everything for the whole team, because it gets your defense off the field a little bit. The offense is able to breathe somewhat and doesn't have as much pressure on it. I think it all starts with the defense, and this is a big year for Coleman Hutzler. Jeff Lebby could have very easily gotten rid of him after what we saw last year, and Lebby looked at it and said, I think it's a player's problem. I think we need to go get better players. I don't think this is a coaching situation. And so he kept his entire defensive staff intact. They went out and they added a couple of pieces as far as experience analyst, and Paul Rhodes, a longtime defensive coordinator and the Iowa State head coach, and also Mike McIntyre, who is also a longtime defensive coordinator. Adding those two pieces into the room, I think, should help Coleman Hutzler, a guy that coming in had never really called a defense before. I know he'd been a co-defensive coordinator, but it had never really been his defense. And I'm sure last year was a little bit of a culture shock in that regard. But he's also coached under some great defensive coaches over his career, and he knows a thing or two about defense. So we'll see if it was indeed a player issue for Mississippi State, or if you have a repeat of last year. I don't see a way forward for Coleman Hutzler, but it's all going to play out this season. It's going to be a very important season for him.
Tell me a little bit about Isaac Smith. I know the Mississippi State defense had two guys who had over 100 tackles last year. One is off to the NFL playing for the 49ers, but Isaac Smith is back, a big part of that back end. What's his role going to be this year?
Yeah, he's a guy that's really hard-nosed, kind of personifies Mississippi. And, he really took a step forward last year. As a true freshman, he was a 4-star talent. Everybody was after him. State beat LSU for his signature, and he kind of took his lumps a little bit as a true freshman. But last year, he played a huge role and was the SEC's leading tackler, and really one of the only bright spots that we saw on the defensive side of the ball. He's going to play kind of a hybrid linebacker / safety. He's going to play a lot in the box, which really fits the mold of what he is as a player. Going to put his head in there, and he's going to make some plays for you in the run game. I think that he is a huge piece to get back on this team. Could have very easily hit the transfer portal, and I think he would have been a wanted man in the portal. I think a lot of teams would have been after him and probably would have made a lot of money. But very loyal to Mississippi State, growing up right down the road and outside of Tupelo. And his dad played at Ole Miss, but he felt like Mississippi State was a good fit for him and his personality. I think he's right on with that. He's a guy that he likes to hunt and fish and kind of a simple kind of kid. And he ends up at Mississippi State, and he had a great season last year. They really need him to have another good year this year as well. But I think this year he's going to have a little more help from the defense, specifically in the front seven with the defensive line and the linebackers. He should have some help this year.
Looking through the roster, there are 3 former Longhorns there in Starkville. One came by way of Oklahoma. That's Brennan Thompson. But there's also Darian Gillette, also Jere Bledsoe. What are some of the outlooks for those 3 guys who used to wear burnt orange and are now wearing maroon?
Well, I think they hope that those guys are able to bring them some pass rush and some help on the defensive line. That's in the front seven as a whole. That's kind of what you went out there and did. You went and got guys that are SEC caliber athletes. And I know those guys didn't have huge numbers at Texas, but they were recruited to Texas for a reason. And they were recruited by other SEC schools for a reason. And State wanted to go out there and get bodies that fit the mold of what you're looking for inside the SEC, what helps you win games. And the hope is, and we've seen it before, usually I think the transition coming from a guy that's been really, really productive in the group of 5, that guy has been able to translate a little bit better at times than the guy that wasn't getting as much playing time in the SEC or was being recruited over because of the reps that they picked up. But I think both these guys have had some quality reps inside the SEC, and the hope is you get out of a little bit of crowded room that you were in at Texas and you come in at Mississippi State, you get those opportunities and things kind of explode for you. That's the hope with those guys. And also just at the very least, you provide quality depth for the defensive line and the linebackers. I think that's key for Mississippi State. You need to hit on these kind of guys coming in. You need to hit it on as many as you possibly can to make your defensive front as good as you can possibly make it. So hopefully those guys can get a good season here and go out on a high note.
I know Texas is heading to Starkville. They'll be playing there, I think, for the first time since the 90s. And I think I may have mentioned this to you before. My wife's from West Point. So I've been to Starkville. I've met Hobie. I don't know if the place is still there, but been there. I know Strange Brew sponsors y'all's board. I've been to Restaurant Tyler, Whiskey Ranch. But for anybody who's going to be making their way to the Starkville area, I know for the most part, you got to fly through Jackson. You could fly somewhere else. But what are some things Texas fans should know about headed to Starkville? And aside from the fact that they're going to be treated to a chorus of cowbells on basically every play.
Yeah, I think the Texas folks would enjoy it. We do have an airport that's right outside of Columbus, in between Columbus and Starkville, GTR. It's going to be a little bit more than what you would pay to come in from Jackson, but it might be a good option for you. But yeah, we have some great food in Starkville. Starkville gets a bad rap, but it really is a great little college town with some good food. Just about any kind of food that you are looking for, we possess there. The place where the Texas fans, if you're looking to go out for the nightlife and mix in food and drinks, is the Cotton District, and we've got 2 or 3 different restaurants right there in the Cotton District. We have Two Brothers Smoked Meats, which is kind of a smoked meats barbecue type spot. I highly recommend it for wings, pulled pork. I love the wings and the pork rind nachos that they have there. We also have the Older Brother, which is as we say on our podcast, the home of fancy sandwiches. You can get a really good Philly cheesesteak. You can get one of the best cheeseburgers in town at that spot. That's also in the Cotton District. Ben 612 has some great food as well right across the street. And then we got Bulldog Burger that's down the street. We also have a brand new large-scale bar that's 2 levels. It's called The Landing. It's right there by Bulldog Burger. That's the space to be if you're a Texas fan that weekend. Go check out the Cotton District. Great brunch and lunch options at Restaurant Tyler. Everybody loves when they come into town, the breakfast spot to go to is Starkville Cafe, kind of an old school diner feel for you in downtown Starkville. There's just some really good spots. And I think Texas fans would really enjoy it if they came up for a visit that weekend. I think you guys would really enjoy that.
I know a lot of fans who made it to Duty Noble and enjoyed the left field lounge during the series this past year. And so I know they're excited. And I know there are a lot of good golf courses out there. I know some may be a little bit more exclusive than others, but there's some great places to swing around and play 18. So I'm with you all the way. I love it. My trip out there. My wife's looking forward to going back and seeing the Golden Triangle, and should be a lot of fun this year. So, Robbie, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on, and looking forward to seeing you in Starkville or probably Atlanta in just about a month's time for SEC Media Days.
Yeah, man. I'll be at both. Looking forward to it.